This little orange box would have to be one of the most recognizable pedals in music. You speak to any guitarist and chances are it was their first pedal. This one was mine. And if it's not still on their board, it'll be in a box or a drawer somewhere because people tend not to throw them away, even though they do cop quite a bit of flack. In certain online circles and forums, this is considered to be almost the baseline for how bad a pedal can actually be. But I've always loved it, so today I figured we'd take a closer look at it. We're going to be looking into how to get the absolute best out of it and 4 steps to dialing in the perfect settings for you and your rig to get some really awesome tones. I'll also give more of my own thoughts and opinions towards the end of the video, and you can check the progress bar and description below for the timestamps to help you find exactly what it is you're looking for. But otherwise, let's just jump straight in. Now for a bit of background on the pedal, Boss first released the DS-1 back in 1978, which is over 40 years ago, and in the time since they've sold upwards of 1.5 million units. Now to put that into context, over the entire course of their history and existence, Boss have sold just over 10 million units total. So this little beast makes up for almost 15% of their total sales, which is just insane. It's been used on the boards of a number of different legendary guitarists, including Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Kurt Cobain, and John Frusciante, as well as numerous others. So while it does cop a bit of flack, it really can't be all that bad. Brand new, it retails for $60 US. It's built in the traditional Boss construction and design, which I'm pretty sure it may have invented. And its 3 knobs, tone level and distortion, keep to the traditional Boss layout. The tone control is quite interesting because it either boosts the lows and cuts the highs, or cuts the lows and boosts the highs with a sort of shifting mid-frequency scoop depending on where you have the knob positioned. And in this respect in voicing, it's very similar to that of an Electro-Harmonix Big Muff Fuzz. The level just controls the final overall output of the pedal, and the distortion controls the second gain stage in the DS-1's distortion circuit. So the first is just an input boost with a fixed level of gain, and the second is the clipping diode stage where the amount of distortion is controlled by the knob. And largely this pedal is the same now as it was when it was first released over 40 years ago, the most notable changes being to that of the internal op amp, which went through a couple of different versions over the years, until in 2006 things settled on a New Japan radio op amp, and all models built since then have used that, including this one. And while there are a couple of other choices in Boss's DS range, such as the DS-1X or the DS2 Turbo, the one we're going to be looking at today is just the good old standard DS-1. And this is the store-bought version, so there's no aftermarket adjustments or mods or anything like that. But alright, so now that we've given the pedal a bit of a rundown, let's have a look at some tones. So you can hear there that the pedal is a little bit more vintage voiced, which makes sense given the time period it was released. And when you're at higher gains, there are elements of the lower end which have a little bit of a fuzzy kind of overtone to them. But something that I think the DS-1 does incredibly well is retain the clarity of your tone. And you can hear that specifically in the kind of edge of the note and in your pick attack. It really remains crystal clear even when you're at higher gain levels, and I think that's a really great quality. But alright, so now that we've heard some tones and established the character of the pedal, let's take a look at the steps to dialing in the best possible sound that we can. So the first step to unlocking the true potential of the DS-1 is to run it into an amp that's already running a little bit hot. And the reason for this is because when the DS-1 was released, it was the era of sort of wall of sound distortion, when the only way guitarists could get a really great distortion tone was by cranking their single channel amps all the way to near exploding deafening levels. And the DS-1 was Boss's response and solution to that, to give guitarists the same great distortion tone at a more manageable and controllable level. But the amps that they were going to be running into were still going to be loud and they were still going to be hot. So it was designed specifically to interact with amps in these circumstances, and there's a very noticeable difference in the performance and sound of the pedal depending on the drive settings of the amplifier. Typically it'll sound absolutely terrible, it'll sound harsh and brittle and horrible if running into the front of a sparkling clean amp, but when it runs into something with a little bit of heat behind it, that's when it really comes into its own. Now to begin dialing in the settings of the DS-1, you want to start with gain. And for gain, you want to have it at around 2 o'clock, from which you dial backwards down. This is because anything after 2 o'clock is where the signal becomes quite squashed and quite overcompressed. And it's actually in the lower gain levels that the DS-1 really begins to shine. Now I actually prefer to go quite low with it around 8 or 9 o'clock, because it's within this range that you still get quite a significant amount of crunch, but the pedal manages to retain so much of the clarity of your original bass tone, as well as the dynamics of your playing. Next, for tone, you don't want to make any major adjustments. I find that the best EQing for the DS-1 comes from just very slight adjustments either side of 12 o'clock, because any further than that can make things too dark or way too brittle. So just slight EQing and adjustments to suit the setup that you have, so your amp and your guitar, and that's really all that's needed. And finally, now that we have our distortion and our tone dialed into taste, we want to look at level. And on the DS-1, the level can be a pretty significant tone shaping control. On an amp that's already at the edge of breakup and with the DS-1 engaged at a lower gain, by increasing the level, you're pushing to get more breakup from the amp itself. You're really kind of forcing it to open up and become more alive and get the natural kind of amp-like overdrive that comes from that, with the clarity of the DS-1 sitting on top. And the best part about all of this is that due to the way that the DS-1 is designed, it's incredibly sensitive to the input signal from your guitar, which means it cleans up really well off the volume pot. So if you balance the settings of the DS-1 with the settings on your amp to find the maximum amount of gain that you need, you can then roll off using your volume pot to find a nice clean tone without having to step on and off the pedal, with it kind of functioning as like an always on pedal. And what this means is that your tone will be much more consistent overall, with the natural warm overdrive coming from your amp complemented by the clarity and the definition of the DS-1. So those are the 4 steps that I'd recommend for dialing in the best possible tones from your DS-1. And to recap, you want to start by playing into the front of an amp that's already running a little bit hot. Next, for distortion, you want to start at 2 o'clock and dial backwards. Then for tone, just slight adjustments either side of 12 o'clock. And then finally, for level, you want to use that to push the front of your amp a little bit harder to force it to break up and kind of push into the territory of its own natural warm overdrive. And as an additional step from that, you can dial in the maximum amount of gain that you'll need and then roll off and clean up using the volume pot, treating the DS-1 as an always on pedal and more as a part of your amp. Every distortion that I play in my head, I end up comparing it to the DS-1. Now that could be because of the number of years that I played it and only it, but for me, it just seems to have a certain sound and tone that I haven't found in any other drive pedal, a certain kind of spank and pop that just always seems to be missing for me. And to be honest, it never really occurred to me that this wasn't a fantastic drive pedal until I started to do proper research into gear and saw the discussions about it online. And granted, I can understand why this isn't a pedal for everyone, especially given the quality and the versatility of basically any other drive that's available on the market today. The DS-1 does have quite a scooped voicing and EQ, and it's almost high maintenance given that you really do have to work to make it usable within your rig. While it's labeled as a distortion pedal, past a certain point it really doesn't go all that hot, and it's really only versatile within its given quite specific classic rock fields. But those are all part of the reason that I love it. I'm a very simple player. I like to have one pedal for one job, which I can dial in very quickly and very easily and know exactly what it'll sound like when I step on it. And with the DS-1, I have that. I've also always lent more towards scooped voicings than anything else, as well as harsher, brighter, kind of more grating guitar tones. And I love the sound of the DS-1 coming through the front of a dirty amp. The only reason I don't have it on my board at the moment is because I'm still trying my hand with other drives and other distortions to see what else works for me. But to be completely honest with you guys, I don't think I've found something that I find as satisfying to listen to as the DS-1. And that's really all there is. But alrighty guys, that is about everything for today, and as always I hope that there was something in this video that was useful for you or something you were able to learn from. If so, do let me know down below. Same goes if you have any tips or suggestions for how you yourself use your DS-1. If you have any ideas for a pedal or a video that you want to see in future, or even if you have any feedback for how I can improve my videos moving forward, literally anything you want, drop a comment below or shoot me a message over on my Instagram, which is linked in the description below as well, because I would genuinely love to hear from you. But otherwise, I'll just take this opportunity to say thanks for watching, and thanks for doing all the usual business to help support my channel and my videos. Thanks for sticking around, and yeah, I will see you in a bit.